Here's a couple things to remember if you're going to be talking about this to other people. Be aware that if you're on the internet and you're talking about this, yes, you will probably cross contaminate yourself if you're looking into hashtags or whatever with some of the worst human beings on the planet. Thems would be the anti-Semites. The anti-Semites are human scum. They're Nazis. They're Nazis, all right? And they have been. Jewish people have been vilified throughout human history and used as a scapegoat throughout human history. So make no mistake, do not ever even flirt with those sides of the internet. They are fucking the baddies, and the Nazis are the only people who should be made to feel afraid 24/7. That is a big difference from the government of Israel, all right? The government of Israel is very, very different than saying Jewish people or bankers or cabal or whatever you want to say, okay? There is nothing wrong with criticizing the actions of the government of Israel, and you should feel completely comfortable doing so, especially in public settings. Normalize it. Normalize it. It is good for that to be normal because that is how these things kind of start to change. You cannot change a problem unless you admit or like even admonish that you have one, and we have a massive problem here, all right? We have a human rights problem, and it's horrifying. Welcome everybody. How is my voice? Is it too loud? Am I coming in clear? I want to be crystal clear for what I'm about to do, which is, I guess, cancel myself. I can't talk about the story without canceling myself. That, or I gotta do the liberal thing. I'm gonna do the lib thing, and I'm just gonna say this is a tragedy on both sides. Both sides, all right? This is just, it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy for both sides. That's all I'm gonna say. Both sides are obviously doing bad things and good things. Okay, both sides have done positive and negative aspects pursuant to their own condition. I think that's probably clear enough. I'd like to turn to the leader of the Green Party of Canada, Elizabeth May. Thank you, Mark Garneau. I think we should strengthen our condemnation of the treatment of Palestinians in Sheikh Jarrah. As you say, both sides must step back. Both sides must step back. Yep. Yeah, I agree. Both sides need to chill. Okay? Just that's it. That's it. The deacons, think for the 300 biddies. It's two equally powerful, let's just say, nations existing within the same area. They both have completely equal complicitance. I can't even say it. Fuck. This is apartheid. This is terrorism. This is horrifying. It was a weekend of just utter shock and bafflement. And unfortunately, I feel like the only people who are fully aware of the gravity of all this are you online. Those who are online enough to witness what is going on. It's been erupting in various forms of violence. Obviously, the Al-Aqsa Mosque is the saddest event that's happened, especially because this is an incredibly sacred temple. Well, not to mention that it's the holiest time. It's like the very end of Ramadan, when everyone was about to finish their fast, when they started opening fire into the mosque itself. Like, I can't stress enough what would be the international condemnation had this happened in, say, a synagogue. Imagine a synagogue while people were praying in one of the holiest days, and then other people just opening fire. This is 100% terrorism. It's a campaign of terror designed to strike fear in the hearts of what they consider their enemies. And it was nonstop. This in amongst, like, leading up to this, we've been seeing the footage of people just getting evicted from their homes. I mean, you'd used to think that it was this kind of idea that, well, maybe people who are anti-Semitic, or people who are trying to paint this really favorable version of Hamas for some reason, which happens to be like a terrorist organization, why are they then always saying that people just like get evicted from their homes? Like, it's most likely people like when they die, their houses then get acquired, or no, it's very, very literal. People are just in their houses, and then they come up to the door and they say, you have to leave. And it's like, but I live here. All my stuff, this is my literal house. It's like, yeah, it's not anymore. Now you have to leave your house. This is our house now, and we're going to continue to do this and push you further and further and squish you further and further into the very edges and the precipice of the land, continuously expanding into the Gaza Strip and the West Bank.
Ramadan, more violence on the streets of occupied East Jerusalem. Palestinian protesters threw water bottles. Israeli security forces used stun grenades, foul-smelling, chemically laced water jets, and close-up physical force.
That's fucked up that it's not even just a water jet. It has to be foul-smelling, chemically laced. What, like, does it have to burn? Is it like, well, it's not gonna be effective unless it's acid. So let's bleach up this water. You know, we can't spray with regular water. I mean, come on, we got business to attend to here.
This man was beaten on the ground in front of us and then ushered away into the night with no attempt to detain him. It wasn't an isolated incident. So the period just before and around prayers was relatively calm here at Damascus Gate, but in the last few minutes it's erupted into another night of tension and scuffles. The worry is that another potentially violent night could ensue. In the following hours, that potential was fulfilled. The anger here isn't just about the scenes from Al-Aqsa on Friday when stun grenades were used inside the mosque itself. It's been building over threats to forcibly evict Palestinian families. Not just like, goddamn, we're all complicit. Like every one of us. I mean, it doesn't matter where you're watching this from right now. You know, Canada is constantly sending aid and supply to Israel. The United States is. But these are the kind of actions that should be immediately not only condemned, but be like, well, now we need to put sanctions on Israel or something. I mean, obviously, you're not going to take any kind of military intervention. I understand that, U.S., but at most, you're probably just hoping for Joe Biden to both sides it publicly, right? That's the most you're going to get. It's going to be like, well, you know, this is concerning to us, deeply concerning. Obviously, we are paying very close attention to what is taking place, and yeah, we'll see where it goes. We'll see where it goes. Which was basically what Justin Trudeau said. In effect, was this is of course concerning, deeply concerning. Families from their homes in the East Jerusalem neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah.
I say that while I'm like, oh yes, you know, you got to choose what you buy. Your purchases are definitely very important. Oh, that's good. Oh, sweet carbonation. Better than regular water, I would say. Doesn't support anything remotely bad. Back to this.
People's solidarity gave us the power to continue with our peace.
Right, said Rob. I had a hard time grasping Eris's perspective on this, and also possibly her views on monarchies. Would you please explain? I haven't seen or heard Eris. Eris, for the most part, when I was talking to her, she seemed to be pretty anti-Israel apartheid. She was saying that it's a tough place for you to be in, but obviously, you know, like most lefty people who are also Jewish, I condemn the actions of Israel. Hi, Lance. I'm a 27-year-old Jewish American who visited Israel for 6 months during 2014 during the height of Hamas's missile attacks. I see a lot of misinformation about the struggle going on there and a lot of hot takes from people who blindly defend Israel. I recommend the book Oh Jerusalem if people are interested in learning a lot about World War II Israel. Oh, thank you. I'll check that out.
Peaceful resistance. All that we are asking is peaceful solidarity against our eviction. We ask any organization or government.
Is nonsense, apartheid is an Afrikaans world. It's not applicable at all. The correct term, I don't know how to pronounce that, or hafrada. Oh, let me look up hafrada. Hafrada is the policy of the government of Israel to separate the Israeli population from the Palestinian population in the occupied Palestinian territories to both Palestinian enclaves and West Bank. Oh, well, thank you. I will update.
to stand with us and help prevent the forceful evictions in Sheikh Jarrah.
Yeah, I was going to say, my understanding was apartheid means segregation. That was the actual literal translation. Because we've used apartheid for things outside of South Africa, for example, in history.
We are the rightful owners. We are the owners of the land. All we want is for them to stay away. The forged papers they have do not make them the rightful owners.
It's been present since the start of the holy month.
I'd better give you the straight answer. I think Zionism, the idea of building a state of Jewish farmers...
Oh, thank you, Mr. Braindead. Appreciate that.
...is a stupid idea to begin with. I've always thought so. My mother wanted to go and be a Zionist immigrant at one point. I tried to talk her out. Superstitious idea. And I think
so the idea of Israel's right to exist is...
Well, no, now that it's there...
has no play with you.
Many states are founded on injustices or foolishness and bad ideas.
And boundaries are drawn by all kinds of political...
Yeah, it doesn't mean that anyone can just come and evict or destroy them. And I'm not saying that, but I think I'd have to say, so as not to seem shady,
yeah.
I've always thought it's a silly, messianic, superstitious nationalist idea, and it's a waste of Judaism. And it guaranteed a quarrel with the Arabs because it meant we're going to take away from you what's most precious, your land, by trying to make Jews into peasants. Already a silly idea. That's not the way to rescue Central European Jewry, make them into farmers in Palestine. Guaranteed an injustice to the Arabs, which now anyone can see, and is now entering its third, fourth generation. Fourth generation of Palestinians brought up either in exile or dispossession or under occupation and humiliation.
Wait, SodaStream. SodaStream, made in Israel. This product was produced by Arabs and Jews working side by side in peace and harmony. Okay. Well, that sounds lovely. Maybe the solution to all of this was capitalism all along. We just need more products that they can harmonize over.
And now we know that something has to be done to address what is part of the original, let's not call it original sin, original misconception of the thing. So I've been writing in favor of the Palestinian homeland all my life, and I'm no more, no less in favor of it than I was because of recent events.
And now the Bush administration is
in favor. It's a matter of principle.
And now the Bush administration is in favor of it.
Well, yes, they were edging towards it. It's a pity about the timing, because they were edging towards it before. I don't want it to look as if they did it as a concession. But it should be a matter of principle. If Jews born in Brooklyn have a right to a state in Palestine, then Palestinians born in Jerusalem have a right to a state in Palestine. Anyone who doesn't agree with that principle, I think, is suspect. I think most people do.
Yeah, oh, man. I have such a hard relationship with Hitchens. He used to be an OG to me, you know. But then 9/11 happened, and it kind of broke his brain. To be fair, it broke a lot of like people's brains. There was a lot of brain breaking that happened with 9/11.
People found a major post-prayers gathering
pretty
point
big event
barred off, and it's been exacerbated by interventions from the Israeli far right.
We don't have not light at the end of the tunnel, but we don't have a tunnel because there is no peace process. East Jerusalem is occupied. It's not Israeli sovereignty in Jerusalem. It hasn't been recognized by the international community. So we are sitting on a volcano.
There are concerns of a further deterioration. On Monday, thousands of Jewish Israelis are set to march through the old city's Muslim quarter to mark the Israeli seizure of East Jerusalem in 1967, on the same day as a Supreme Court hearing on the Sheikh Jarrah evictions. Dangerous days ahead for a flashpoint city that can be both a focal point and a fuse for conflict within and far beyond its streets. Harry Fawcett, Al Jazeera, occupied East Jerusalem.
Mustafa Barghouti is Secretary General of the Palestinian National Initiative political party. He says this is the latest example of years of oppression.
What you see here is a reflection of a system of racism and discrimination against Palestinians. Not only we have been under occupation for more than 54 years, but on top of that, Israel has established a system of apartheid and racial discrimination. The vast majority of Palestinians today are prohibited from reaching Jerusalem and participating in the prayer in the mosque, as much as the Christians were also prohibited from participating in the Eastern, during Easter time, to be in the Church of Holy Sepulchre. This is a discriminatory system, and of course what you see here is protest against this discrimination. On top of that, Israel, as you have indicated, is trying to conduct ethnic cleansing in one of the major neighborhoods in Sheikh Jarrah, as much as they do that also in other neighborhoods in Jerusalem. So basically...
Can't say the G word, though. You know what happens there. If you say the G word, you'll summon someone, and she'll need a date, and then you're going to have to get that date, and if you don't have a date handy, then, you know, it's going to be a whole thing, and... You know, just give me a date. I gotta get the date. Figure that date out. If only we could figure the date out. You know, it's been a while. Just trying to find that date. I'm actually trying to find that document that I wrote years. Was that a year ago? How long ago was that debate? The Shira thing was after that. Saving Shira. The Great Book of Butter Horse is still here. That was a weird phase. Vaccines, Impressions, Elon Musk, John Tron. Tree of Logic. There it is. Yes. The term genocide was coined by Raphael Lemkin. It's a combination of the Greek words for race or people and act of killing. Is Israel occupying stolen land? In 1917, the British government wanted support of Jewish people, so they issued the Balfour Declaration, the establishment of Palestine of a home for the Jewish people. Even though they didn't control it, it was currently under Ottoman control until the end of World War I. A year before the Balfour Declaration, the British secretly promised it to the French. Then the other officials promised to the ruler of Mecca in 1915 if he led an Arab revolt against the Ottoman rule, which they did, and then afterwards to themselves. Then the British establishment established a colony in Palestine that allowed the Jewish people to move and settle there. The Jewish population increases by 300,000, honoring the Balfour Promise of the British. They started a process of buying the land on which Palestinian farmers live and began to control both the land and the labor therein. In 1936, the Palestinian forces revolt against the British. With the help of Jewish militias, the British brutally suppressed the Palestinian revolt. Britain issues a white paper calling for the joint Jewish-Arab state within 10 years. Britain limited Jewish immigration, which angered Zionists. World War II goes down. Britain can no longer support and manage the colonies. Post-war, they handed over to the UN. The first major problem was this newly formed organization. 1947, the UN partition plan, which was divided the area into two states roughly equal in size. Borders saw this was a jigsaw puzzle, the worst part of the solution that continues to this day. 1948, Arab-Israeli war breaks out. Israel wins, and then when an armistice is signed against Israel, they occupy more than a third of the land under the UN treaty, increasing their size of their ownership there. Israel annexes part of Egypt and Jordan. 700,000 Palestinians are displaced from their homes. The state of Israel is established, and Palestinians experience the Nakba, or statelessness. The 1967 is the Six-Day War. It breaks out, and Israel gains the Sinai Peninsula, the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, the Golan Heights, and Egypt and Jordan, respectively. Questions do come when they annex the West Bank and millions of Arabians living there make them citizens. While debating, the settlers begin moving into the West Bank without permission, religious the Holy Lands of Judea and Samaria, the flyover roads. 1967 UN resolution states the settlements are illegal. Colonizing land to expand their nation, Israel builds a massive road infrastructure that allows travel within the West Bank, and settlements become an institutionalized part of Israeli society. Settled growth around this time increases to further complicate the two-state solution, and Hamas rises to power due to its militancy and its social programs. They build schools, hospitals, and mosques. That's the one aspect of Hamas that's hard to condemn, because Hamas does do horrifyingly brutal things. There's no question about that. I'm never going to sit here and defend Hamas, but Hamas's rise to power came by both the you can say it was birthed out of a military necessity at the time, which was basically saying, hey, we're about to become eradicated off the face of the earth. This is how we're going to defend ourselves. And yes, like most occupied forces up against infinitely more powerful aggressors, they will involve and engage in usually brutal tactics, which include, yes, bombing schools or hospitals or mosques, or synagogues or things like that. So I'm not saying that Hamas is a good organization, but they were simultaneously building schools, hospitals, and mosques within the area. 2004, Prime Minister Ariel Sharon withdraws Israeli settlers from the Gaza Strip. This inflames the ultra-conservative sentiment in the country, redoubles their efforts to settle in the West Bank. I think I went through most of this back then, but one of the reasons why a lot of this is so hard to grasp, Israel, Palestine, growth. Where's the one that shows you the loss of land? When you look at this image, you've probably seen this viral image in a couple of places. showing you how much territory was originally considered Palestinian territory around 1897. Well, technically Ottoman Empire territory where Palestinians were living. At which point you can see then the green areas are basically the original Jewish land from the beginning of the Zionist movement. Around 1947, the UN partition plan, you can see how it slowly started to become a lot more, let's just say, closed in, I would believe would be the most technical term I can put. But anyways, if we push all the way to present, 2012, the reason this is so incredibly complicated is that, again, Israel built an incredibly complex road system that goes through what are considered the occupied territories around here, allowing Israelis to be able to travel through that region and to be able to work. A lot of the factories and stuff take place around this area, but it also allows them to maintain this segregation in which you can have kind of a dual class citizenry, because a lot of these homes are, again, built in between these new roadways. It's not as if you can suddenly say, well, you know what, this clearly isn't working out. All right, everybody, what we should do is we should just do the humane thing and say, we're going to like cut a border here, and this can be considered Palestine and this can be considered Israel. 2 states, stop warring, you get this part, you get this part, and then we're done, right? There's no more expansion, there's no more, pushing through. Whereas the perpetual system we have, again, and the reason it's so very, very difficult, it's very similar to indigenous land in Canada, right? Indigenous land in Canada is kind of like woven into the very, like, geography of the country itself. So if you were to say, and that's why pipelines have such a difficult time pushing massive pipelines through the entirety of Canada, because again, there's like all these like what are considered independent nation states within the country itself, and they're just kind of like peppered all over the place. And obviously they've been squeezed and pushed and shrunk over the years through the genocide of Canada. But a very similar thing is occurring here, where again, squeezing and pushing, but also interweaving it with roads, keeping it in this continuous state that we find ourselves today. Israel could stop building settlements anytime they wanted to. It completely withdrew from the West Bank anytime they wanted to. It could let refugees and families come home anytime it wanted to. There doesn't need to be any negotiation at all to do these things. So the question needs to be directed as to why there's any justification for not doing these things, and what the other country or any other player in the situation does or doesn't do, whether or not it is bad or also bad to be condemned. It's an unprecedented jigsaw of settlements in Palestinian territory in the West Bank and a violent Hamas-controlled area of Gaza. Merging them into nation-states becomes more difficult with every settler that arrives in either area. This is true. Every single time there's, oh, thank you very much, Sobriety Power Spike. Every single time there's a new settlement that takes place, the entire issues become further complicated, right? Because there's going to always be this claim on the other side. Well, yeah, but do you want to kick like an old Jewish woman out of her like house in the West Bank? Do you think that's fair? Because that sounds pretty horrifying. And if you're like, well, no, I don't want to do that, but you're doing that. That's what you're doing right now to old Palestinian women. You're doing that exact same thing. And they're like, okay, well, we're going to stop soon. It's just a little bit more. Okay, see, we stop, we're good. Just a few more. Just like 3 more, 4, maybe 5. I was like, well, no, you just have to stop, period. You're continuously doing this. Like, you understand how this, you're actively doing this. It's not as like, if you say you're going to stop, you stop. And then that's it. We don't do this anymore. But that is not how this is working out. This is turning into an issue of stolen land, of colonization. The U.S. is the only one that can make a difference in the Israel-Palestine. But that's the problem, is that the U.S. is also, okay, so the U.S. is, in large part, especially a large part of the centrist Democratic Party and the Republican Party almost in entirety is heavily influenced by the right Christian lobby. All right, the right Christian lobby groups. And it doesn't just mean that there's some shadowy organization of Christians who hang out behind a cabin in the woods and just talk about how, oh yes, soon we will control all of Israel. It's more just like a whole bunch of incredibly rich, wealthy, entrenched white supremacists who have been powerful in the United States for a very long time, are also deeply connected with the Christian right movement. And because of that, they have very, very strong ties to political parties, lobbying groups, political agents. And they also genuinely believe 2 things. Either A, they literally believe this, in which case that's more frightening to me, but they believe that the second coming of Jesus is on its way. Jesus is coming back, all right? Jesus 2.0, except it's much scarier because when Jesus returns, it's going to be basically with the whole, Revelations thing. It's not going to be a good look, all right? Half of y'all are sinners, especially me, and we're all just going to be Thanos snapped, evaporated into nothing. But then there's God's chosen people, and I'm not talking about the Jewish people, I'm talking about the Christians, the good Christians, the ones who believed in the prophecy. They will be rewarded with everlasting heaven, which, I mean, ask one of them to define it. They'll probably tell you about clouds and, I don't know, Yoplait. Is that like what white people think heaven is going to be? Lots of Yoplait, I assume. Just like fountains of Yoplait, and they're just like bathing in it and weird shit like that. That's basically it, that's their idea. In order for that to do, or in order for that to become something, what they'll necessarily have to do is they'll have to make sure that God's chosen people, aka the Jewish people, are located within the sacred and holy land. That's the reason why the Christian right and right-wingers in the United States are so concerned with the state of Israel. It's not because they care about Jewish people. In fact, most of them are probably pretty fucking racist against Jewish people. Most of them probably harbor pretty, little subtle anti-Semitic beliefs, Probably like, oh yes, I have a Jewish friend. He happens to be a lawyer. Tee-hee, you know why. And he happens to probably have a lot of gold saved up. Tee-hee, you know why. But I deeply care about Israel. I deeply care about the Israeli state and making sure that it's a safe place,
This is the evolution of a strong struggle against racism, against apartheid, and against the occupation that has lasted longer than anybody can tolerate.
Reports are coming in that hundreds have been injured in fresh clashes in Jerusalem. Police have fired stun grenades and tear gas at stone-throwing demonstrators inside the Al-Aqsa Mosque complex.
By the way, the Al-Aqsa Mosque is, I believe, 200 years older than the Notre Dame Cathedral. Do you remember when the fires started on the Notre Dame Cathedral and every fucking billionaire and millionaire was just like aghast? They were just like, oh my, the horror. We must fundraise immediately. Rebuild it. Rebuild this institution. This can never, we cannot let this aggression stand. We care deeply about religious institutions, especially ones that have such archaeological value. I mean, this thing it's intrinsic to the very beauty and nature of humanity. We must preserve at all costs. Quickly, throw money. Throw all the monies at it. There you go. Not my bells. And then this goes down. Radio silence, crickets. Probably just like, I don't know. What are they? Are they gassed because they're Hamas? Is that what's happening here?
And today, tensions are particularly high as Israel is marking Jerusalem Day, the anniversary of when Israeli troops captured East Jerusalem in 1967. Amid growing international calls for calm, the UN Security Council is holding an emergency session to discuss the situation.
Here's a couple of facts, okay? There will never be a good solution to this as long as Benjamin Netanyahu has any kind of even tenuous grasp on power. There will not be. Benjamin Netanyahu will continue to try and eradicate the Palestinian people off the face of the earth. The man is just a horrifying demonstration of what it like the limits, the boundless limits of human cruelty is Benjamin Netanyahu. So him not forming a government was like, oh, thank God. That doesn't mean he's gone, but it definitely means at this moment there's a little bit of okay, something could possibly happen, which that combined with the date and time, that's why things are kind of, I think, horrifyingly ramping up as rapidly as they are. The US has to join or become involved in this somehow. There was a time when the US, like for all the shitty things that Bill Clinton was doing, there was the performative aspect of him trying to negotiate for a two-state solution, right? And he didn't achieve it. He was just third-waying his way into fucking over all the black Americans that he could. But at the same time, there was at least like an air of like, well, we're open to this. We just need to find whatever combination works. And there never seems to be able to be a magic way to do this because, again, it's really almost impossible if you've got settlements in which people are kind of like jigsaw pieced in, right? Like there's no way to just two-state this when they're woven into each other geographically. That's what complicates this so much further. Did you see the link I posted about the SNL Gen Z sketch? No, I haven't started doing the Elon Musk stuff yet, but we will. We'll get to Elon Musk. Bunsen Honeydew, thank you. Welcome. 12 months. God damn. I've been doing this for too long.
confrontation.
Who the fuck is Bibi? Bibi is the short name for Benjamin Netanyahu, the ex Prime Minister of Israel. He's currently in this gray zone, you know, the upside down. We're not sure whether or not he'll form the next government.
And escalation.
Oh, and when it comes to, again, the right-wing Christian majority of the Americans who want this to take place simply because they want to usher in the second coming of Jesus, that is horrifying. Absolutely horrifying. Like, you don't want a whole bunch of people to be looking forward to the revelation coming true. It was a horrifying part of the Bible. Transgender SJW loses it over pronouns. Okay, I'll watch that later when I'm doing the ghouls. Good old Judeo-Christian values, I know.
It's an entrenched pattern of behavior between Jewish Israelis and Arab Palestinians who make claims to the same land. This time the hatred flared at the Damascus Gate, at the entrance to the Old City. Ownership of land is at the heart of the bitter dispute. The prospect of forced evictions of Palestinians from East Jerusalem has brought Arabs to the streets. Over the past 2 weeks, hundreds of them have been injured as Israeli police cracked down on the demonstrations. On Sunday, they were out again, ahead of a controversial Jerusalem Day march through the Old City. Hardline Israeli nationalists used the annual event to celebrate the capture of East Jerusalem by Israeli forces in the 1967 war. Israeli security officials warn it could lead to a
Dragon01, thank you for the gifted tier 1 sub. Appreciate it.
Further escalation in violence.
No, the Book of Revelations is absolutely batshit. Like, holy fuck. Like, if there was any part of the Bible that I would be completely, utterly afraid for people to actually take literally and adopt, it would be the Book of Revelations. Like, the great serpent of the 5 snakes will drop the hellfire that breathes from its birth tongue upon thy name. Like, you're just like, holy fuck. Like, the Bible, in its descriptions of horrifying manifestations of evil and stuff like that, are incredibly eloquent. But when it comes to, like, describing heaven, it's just like crickets. It's just like, so yeah, again, Yoplait, just fountains of Yoplait. People will just bathe in liquid yogurt all day. That's heaven. That's my kind of heaven.
And we're joined by our correspondent in Jerusalem, Tanya Kramer.
They were high when they wrote it. They were something.
That contentious march is expected to take...
You're mixing up Revelations with Maps of Meaning? No, both, Roman Bear.
...place by Israelis today in Jerusalem. How much potential is there for the violence to escalate?
One part of the Bible that I would prefer people to literally is, I think, in Genesis. I believe Genesis 1:29, and the Lord giveth all seed-bearing fruits for thy use or something. Just like something very basic but not offensive, and then you can be like, okay, great. All the seed-bearing fruits are to be grown. We should legalize all drugs. That one sounds good. Genesis 1:29, legalize all the drugs. Use the seed-bearing fruits. That sounds I guess normal-ish. You know, I'm not terrified by it. That's there. There's that. Revelation is the most canonization trip of all time. True. Anyways, everybody, we're obviously going to be following this story as we're going. Here's a couple things to remember if you're going to be talking about this to other people. Be aware that if you're on the internet and you're talking about this, yes, you will probably cross-contaminate yourself if you're looking into hashtags or whatever with some of the worst human beings on the planet. Thems would be the anti-Semites. The anti-Semites are human scum. They're Nazis, all right? And they have been. Jewish people have been vilified throughout human history and used as a scapegoat throughout human history. So make no mistake, do not ever even flirt with those sides of the internet. They are fucking the baddies, and the Nazis are the only people who should be made to feel afraid 24/7. That is a big difference from the government of Israel, all right? The government of Israel is very, very different than saying Jewish people or bankers or cabal or whatever you want to say, okay? There is nothing wrong with criticizing the actions of the government of Israel, and you should feel completely comfortable doing so, especially in public settings. Normalize it. It is good for that to be normal because that is how these things kind of start to change. You cannot change a problem unless you admit or like even admonish that you have one, and we have a massive problem here, all right? We have a human rights problem, and it's horrifying. We have a lot of human rights problems going on all over the world. There's no question about that. This happens to be one in which the United States would be a key player. They are the largest benefactor to Israel. They give them the most amount of material support, the most amount of weapons support, the most amount of military support. The United States is the one propping up Israel as it commits this human atrocity. These crimes against humanity are done on the back of American weaponry funding. And hey, international, by the way, Canada, big old friend of Israel as well. Don't think for a second Canada's innocent. If you Canadians are in the corner just being like, ooh, ooh, no, y'all are just as complicit. Same with you, New Zealand, Australia, all of us, NATO, France, if you're in here, France, you're like, mais c'est pas moi, j'ai fait rien, moi, j'aime seulement du vin, fumer un petit peu. No, bad on you. Mauvais, très mauvais, okay? This shit is happening because of all of us. So we're all complicit. We all have to acknowledge it's horrifying. We all have to boycott this kind of behavior. Sanctions, at the very least. This should be something that when it's going down, when these horrifying atrocities are being committed, when people are like gassing and bombing holy sites, when terrorism is being committed on such a mass scale as to strike fear in the hearts and minds of people, then it has to be condemned. Otherwise, we sit by and we are complicit in it. So that is incredibly, incredibly important.
Hey, do you like movies? Do you like Serfs? Do you want movies and Serfs watching the movies? So then come over to the new channels. It's the Serfs, the cinema. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Can you do the thing, that thumbs up and comment and all those things that help us out in the algorithm that controls every aspect of our lives? Also, if you happen to have a Facebook account, can you delete it? Like just delete it. You should probably delete your Facebook account because it's not a great company. But hey, if you can't do that for whatever reason, I understand. And could you also go to facebook.com/thesurftimes then and give us a little like and a follow. We're just trying to push back against the fact that people like Ben Shapiro happen to dominate the platform entirely. And when everyone asks why do older generations believe the things they believe, one of the problems is the majority of them on social media use Facebook. So to counter that, we're just going to be on there too now. Also, if you happen to have a union or a worker co-op or even a leftist project, podcast, website, Zoom, MySpace, it doesn't matter. We will advertise it for free on this channel. All you got to do is go to weareserfs.com and use the forms that we got there, weareserfs.com. Thanks, everybody.
To our gods, I'm Raft and Xander Corvus. We shall build golden idols in your honor. To our monarch, Tom Spiker. Our soft, spongy flesh is yours to command. To our lords, Evan Nudie, Trevor R., Alexander Thaler, Ryan Lubin, Bisexual Black Gamer, Tofox, and Jeffrey Lamb, we proudly carry your sigils onto the battlefield. And to our Knights of the Round Table, Riley and Anna, Poodlehawk, Multimondi, Timothy Hart, Trevor Janis, Lemmy 101, Anthropophagic, Saren 42, Chronic to Hemphog, Callie Kotka, The Great Pudini, Von Janney, Catherine, Radical Maniac, Ramon Acosta, Encosin, J. Fraser Cartwright, Jimmy Bignuts, Violent Orchard, Sophie Baby, Political Puppy, Andreas Chiringuito, Zach Christensen, Nicholas Marks, Jopi, Josh Mickelson, Melissa Murphy, Todd Buckingham, Todd LaJeunesse, and Constance Joyce Lacheris. We tip our cap and lift our mug and salute you.